The fundamental reason for considering the use of these vaccines morally licit is that the kind of cooperation in evil, passive material cooperation, in the procured abortion from which these cell lines originate is, on the part of those making use of the resulting vaccines, remote. The moral duty to avoid such passive material cooperation is not obligatory if there is a grave danger, such as the otherwise uncontainable spread of a serious pathological agent. In this case, the pandemic spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. It must therefore be considered that in such a case, all vaccinations recognized as clinically safe and effective can be used in good conscience, with the certain knowledge that the use of such vaccines does not constitute formal cooperation with the abortion from which the cells used in production of the vaccines derive. It should be emphasized, however, that the morally illicit use of these types of vaccines in the
Morally illicit.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Morally illicit use of these types of vaccines.
Morally licit.
Why can't I say that? Morally licit, there we go, use of these types of vaccines in the particular conditions that make it so does not in itself constitute a legitimation, even indirect, of the practice of abortion, and necessarily assumes the opposition to this practice by those who make use of those vaccines.
So here they're doing a couple of things. The first one is they are explaining the reason why it's okay in these circumstances to go ahead and use a vaccine, even if it comes from one of these cell lines.
Okay.
And they make a distinction here between what's called formal cooperation with evil and material cooperation with evil. Formal cooperation is where you approve of the evil. So if you say, oh, I'm glad there was an aborted baby back in the 1960s, I'm glad they used abortion and I'm all fine with that, you're formally cooperating with that evil back then by approving it. Material cooperation is where you say, well, I don't approve. I believe that was a crime, but that doesn't mean I'm going to have nothing to do with the situation. And this distinction has been made in moral theology because we live in a world of fallen human beings. Every time you interact with another person here on earth, you're interacting with a sinner. And some of the things that person is going to do will be sinful. If you buy a pizza from someone and you give your $10 or $20 for the pizza, someone who works for the pizza parlor is going to receive some of that money and do something with it they shouldn't. Maybe they're going to make a donation to Planned Parenthood. Maybe they're going to buy illicit drugs. Maybe they're going to buy pornography. Someone is going to do something bad with some of the money you give them. And you cannot, as St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5, you can't simply not associate with sinners. Okay, you'd have to leave the world.
Yeah, because I was going to just point that out. People have said and are saying in the comment section right now, look, remote cooperation with evil is still evil. What would you say to that?
It's not. It is, the evil is evil. Remote cooperation, material cooperation, is not itself evil. Me giving $10 to a pizza delivery guy who may do something bad with part of his paycheck is not me doing the evil. What I'm doing is perfectly fine. What I'm doing is paying a guy $10. There's nothing wrong with handing somebody $10. What he then does with it may be evil, but that's his responsibility, not mine. I'm not saying, hey, why don't you go buy some porn with this?
Okay.
I would be if I was encouraging him to do evil, but I'm not. So cooperation with evil is not itself evil unless you build evil into the cooperation by, say, formally approving of the evil. Mm-hmm. So this is a well-recognized distinction in Catholic moral theology, and you're not going to be able to feed yourself live a life in human society, period, including evangelizing, if you say, I'm never going to have even remote material cooperation with evil. So the recognized principles of Catholic moral theology indicate that when it's remote, passive material cooperation with evil can be justified. And that's what we have in the case of these vaccines. But they don't want to and this is the second thing they do in the paragraph, they don't want to make it sound like it's not a concern at all. And so that's why they add on that extra sentence
Right.
that it needs to be emphasized that just because it's licit to use these vaccines doesn't mean we can in any way approve of abortion. We can't.
Right, and it says this here in the next paragraph. It says, in fact, the licit use of such vaccines does not and should not in any way imply that there is a moral endorsement of the use of cell lines proceeding from aborted fetuses. Both pharmaceutical companies and governmental health agencies are therefore encouraged to produce, approve, distribute, and offer ethically acceptable vaccines that do not create problems of conscience for either healthcare providers or the people to be vaccinated.
Right. So these lines are a concern, even though there are situations that where they can, you can use the vaccines. We don't want to use these. We don't want to be using these. And so here we have the Holy See encouraging government and healthcare agency decision makers to just abandon these and use and approve other lines that are not tainted in this way.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.